The morning sun cast long shadows across the meadow where Marcus Chen tended his hives. At 43, he had grown used to the solitude of his mountain homestead. The bees were better company than most humans he had known. They worked without complaint, protected their own, and never asked questions about why a former xenobiologist had chosen to live alone on the edges of human space. The emergency beacon started screaming just after dawn. Marcus dropped his smoker and ran toward the sound. His weathered hands fumbled with the communication panel as static filled the air. Through the crackling interference, a voice emerged, desperate, alien, and unmistakably female. "Any human settlement. Please respond. My children are dying." The transmission cut to static. Marcus stared at the beacon, his heart pounding. In 12 years of isolation, no one had ever used the emergency frequency. The Galactic Council had strict rules about interspecies contact, especially regarding the Draknari, the dragon-like beings from the Scorpio sector. He grabbed his medical kit and emergency supplies, then paused at his gun cabinet. The plasma rifle felt cold in his hands. Whatever was out there might be dangerous. But something about that voice, the raw desperation, told him weapons wouldn't be needed. The crash site was 3 kilometers away, marked by a column of black smoke rising above the pine trees. Marcus found the ship wedged between 2 massive boulders, its hull cracked like an eggshell. The vessel was beautiful despite the damaged organic curves that seemed grown rather than built, with scales that shifted color in the sunlight. She was sitting beside the wreckage, cradling something in her arms. The Dragnari female was larger than Marcus had expected from the academic texts, nearly 3 meters tall, even seated, with deep emerald scales that caught the light like jewels. Her wings, torn and bleeding, were folded protectively around 4 small forms. When she looked up at his approach, her golden eyes held a mixture of hope and terror. "You came," she whispered in accented standard. "I thought. I hoped." Marcus slowly raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. "I heard your distress call. Are you injured?" She shook her massive head, and Marcus saw tears, actual tears, streaming down her scaled cheeks. "Not me. My daughters. They are dying." The small forms in her arms moved weakly. Baby dragons, no larger than house cats, their scales pale and dull. Their breathing was shallow, labored. "The council sentenced us to exile," the female continued, her voice breaking. "They said I was cursed. 4 females in one clutch. It had never happened before. They called it an abomination and banished us to the dead zones. My ship, the life support failed. My babies cannot breathe your atmosphere properly." Marcus knelt slowly, studying the tiny creatures. His xenobiology training kicked in automatically. The baby's scales were changing color rapidly, a sign of severe respiratory distress in Draknari physiology. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Zareth. And you are human, yes?" The council said humans were primitives. "But you have healing knowledge?" Marcus nodded. "Some, but I'll need to get them to my lab. Can you move?" Zareth struggled to her feet, her injured wings making her stumble. "I will manage. But human, why do you help us?" "Your kind and mine are not allies." "Because you asked," Marcus said simply. "And because no mother should watch her children die." The journey back to his homestead took 2 hours. Zareth moved slowly, stopping frequently to rest. The babies grew weaker with each passing minute. Marcus found himself stealing glances at the dragon mother, noting how she whispered to her daughters in a language that sounded like wind chimes and distant thunder. His laboratory had been gathering dust for years, but the equipment still functioned. Marcus quickly activated the atmospheric processors and began adjusting the air mixture. Dragnari required higher methane content and lower oxygen. He remembered that from his studies. "Lay them here," he instructed, indicating a padded examination table. Zareth placed her daughters carefully on the surface. Up close, Marcus could see how beautiful they were despite their distress. Each had slightly different coloring, one silver-touched, another with hints of gold, the third bearing traces of blue, and the smallest showing flecks of deep purple. "In my ship," Zareth said urgently, "there are medical supplies, Drakthol crystals for their metabolism, but the ship is sealed now, and I cannot." "I'll get them," Marcus said, already moving toward the door. "Stay with your daughters." The crashed ship's emergency systems had activated, sealing the interior to preserve what remained of the life support. Marcus had to cut through the outer hull with his plasma torch, taking care not to damage anything inside. The ship's interior was a wonder of bioengineering. Living walls pulsed with a faint bioluminescence, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with microscopic organisms. He found the medical bay and gathered everything that looked important: crystalline formations, organic containers filled with various substances, and what appeared to be breathing apparatus sized for infants. When he returned, he found Zarath singing. The sound was hauntingly beautiful, a lullaby that seemed to resonate in frequencies human ears couldn't quite catch. The baby dragons had stopped their restless movements and were listening with half-closed eyes. "The crystals," she said as Marcus approached. "They must be dissolved in your water and given to them drop by drop. And these," she indicated the breathing apparatus, "will help filter your air." Working together, they fitted the tiny masks over each baby's snout. The change was immediate. Their breathing became easier. Their scales brightened slightly. "You know our physiology," Zarath observed as Marcus prepared the crystal solution. "How?" "I studied xenobiology before I came here. Your people fascinated me, the way you've adapted to so many different worlds. Your symbiotic technology. I wrote several papers on Draknari respiratory systems." Zarath's golden eyes widened. "You are Dr. Marcus Chen, the one who argued for Draknari inclusion in the medical exchange program?" Marcus paused in his work, surprised. "You know my research? Your papers saved my grandfather's life. He was dying of scale rot on a low-oxygen world. Your atmospheric modification techniques." She touched his arm gently with one clawed finger. "I cannot believe it is you who found us." As they worked through the afternoon, the babies grew stronger. Marcus monitored their vital signs while Zarath told him about their exile. The Draknari Council had declared 4 female births in one clutch to be a sign of genetic corruption. Females were rare among their species, perhaps 1 in 20 births. 4 in one clutch had never been recorded. "They said I was cursed," Zarath explained as she fed her daughters the crystal solution. "That my line was tainted. They gave us a broken ship and exile coordinates to the dead zones, regions of space where nothing lives." "But why female births specifically?" Marcus asked. "In human culture, we don't consider gender a curse. Among my people, females are precious, protected. We are the ones who carry the future of the species. But 4 at once." The council feared it meant change was coming, change they could not control. As evening fell, the babies had stabilized enough for Zarath to relax slightly. She stood by Marcus's window, looking out at his beehives. "What are those structures?" she asked. "Bee colonies. I'm a beekeeper now." Marcus joined her at the window. "After my research was rejected by the Colonial Science Board, I came here. The bees don't care about politics or fear of change." "You were exiled too," Zarath said softly. "For defending my people." "Not exactly exiled. I chose to leave." Marcus watched his bees returning to their hives as darkness approached. "The board decided that advocating for closer relations with non-human species was politically inadvisable. I was asked to focus on more practical research. So you came here. To be alone. The bees keep me company. And occasionally I get visitors." He smiled slightly. "Though usually not crash-landed dragon mothers with quadruplet daughters." Zarath made a sound that might have been laughter. "My daughters will remember this day. When they are grown, they will know that a human male chose kindness over fear." "Will you try to return to Draknari space?" Marcus asked. Zarath's expression darkened. "There is nothing for us there. The council's judgment is final. We are outcasts now." "Then stay." The words surprised Marcus even as he spoke them. Zarath turned to stare at him, her golden eyes reflecting the lamplight. "Stay," she repeated. "Here, on my land. There's plenty of space, and your daughters will need time to grow strong. The nearest human settlement is 200 kilometers away. No one would bother you. You would do this? Shelter us?" Marcus looked at the 4 tiny dragons sleeping peacefully in their makeshift nursery, then at their mother, proud despite her exile, strong despite her fear. "I told you earlier you asked for help, and no mother should watch her children die. But it's more than that now." He met her gaze steadily. 12 years ago, I was forced to choose between my principles and my career. I chose principles and lost everything I thought mattered. But I was wrong about losing everything. I just hadn't found what really mattered yet. And what is that? This. Right here. Being able to help when help is needed. Being useful to someone who deserves kindness." Marcus gestured toward her daughters. "Your babies are extraordinary." Zareth. 4 females in one clutch isn't a curse, it's evolution. It's your species adapting, preparing for something new. Zareth was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the bees hummed their evening songs, and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The council said humans were primitive. She said finally, maybe we are, but primitives can still choose to do the right thing. You truly wish us to remain here? A dragon mother and her cursed daughters? I wish for company that values life over politics. I wish for proof that kindness exists somewhere in this galaxy. Marcus smiled. Besides, I've always wondered what it would be like to have neighbors who could actually appreciate the complexity of a beehive's social structure. Zareth moved closer to the window, her scales shimmering in the starlight. My daughters will grow large, larger than me. Dragons are not small creatures. I have 3,000 acres. Most of it is just meadow and forest. Plenty of room. We eat meat. Large quantities of it. The deer population has been getting out of hand anyway. We breathe fire when we are emotional. I'll invest in better fire suppression systems. Zareth laughed, a sound like silver bells mixed with distant thunder. You have an answer for everything. I've had 12 years to think about what I'd do if I ever got a second chance to matter to someone. Marcus turned from the window to check on the sleeping babies. This feels like that chance. The council will not approve. If they discover we are here, let me worry about the council. I still have some friends in the Colonial Defense Force, people who remember when scientific curiosity was more important than political convenience. Zareth approached the sleeping babies, her massive frame moving with surprising grace. She touched each tiny head gently with one clawed finger, and Marcus saw love so pure it made his chest tight. They need names, she said softly. In my culture, names are chosen based on the first act of kindness shown to a newborn. What would their names be then? Something that speaks of this day, of hope found in darkness, of a lonely keeper of small lives who chose to shelter large ones. The babies stirred in their sleep, their scales catching the lamplight like scattered gems. Marcus watched Zareth with her daughters and felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the satisfaction of being exactly where he was supposed to be. Tomorrow, he said, I'll start building proper sleeping quarters, and we'll need to modify the atmosphere system in at least one building to make it more comfortable for you. You plan so quickly, Zareth observed. I learned early that the best way to handle impossible situations is to start with the practical details. Everything else sorts itself out eventually. Outside, the bees had settled for the night, and the mountain was quiet except for the gentle hum of the laboratory equipment. 4 baby dragons slept peacefully in their nest of soft blankets, their mother watching over them, and a lonely human beekeeper began to understand that sometimes the most important scientific discoveries happened not in laboratories, but in moments of simple compassion. The first day was ending, but Marcus Chen suspected that the real adventure was just beginning. 3 months had passed since Zareth and her daughters arrived at Marcus's homestead, and the mountain meadow had transformed into something magical. The baby dragons had doubled in size and grown bold enough to venture outside their modified habitat. Marcus often found them playing among the beehives, their natural curiosity leading them into gentle mischief. The smallest daughter, whom Zareth had named Veltara, meaning kindness remembered, had developed a particular fascination with the bees. She would sit motionless for hours, watching them work with golden eyes that missed nothing. The bees, surprisingly, seemed to accept her presence. They would even land on her purple-flecked scales, apparently drawn to the warmth she radiated. Marcus was documenting this unprecedented interspecies interaction when his communication panel chimed with an incoming message. He almost ignored it in 3 months. Only supply deliveries had interrupted their peaceful routine, but something about the transmission's frequency made him pause. Marcus Chen, this is Commander Sarah Voss of the CDF Intrepid. Respond immediately. We need to talk. Marcus's blood went cold. Sarah Voss had been his advocate years ago when the scientific board had tried to bury his xenobiology research. If she was calling now, using official channels, something serious was happening. Stand by, Commander, Marcus replied, glancing toward the modified barn, where Zareth was teaching her daughters to properly control their flame glands. Switching to secure channel. The hologram that materialized showed a woman in her 50s, gray-haired and stern-faced, with the kind of expression that had cowed generations of junior officers. Marcus, you magnificent fool, she said without preamble. Do you have any idea what kind of storm you've created? Nice to see you too, Sarah. What storm? The kind that involves a formal inquiry from the Dragnari Council, 3 separate colonial security investigations, and approximately 47 different violations of the interspecies contact protocols. Sarah's expression softened slightly. Also the kind that's got half the xenobiology community calling you either a hero or a madman. Marcus sat down heavily. How did they find out? Satellite surveillance picked up energy signatures consistent with Dragnari technology 3 weeks ago, when the analysis team cross-referenced the location with property records and found your name. Sarah shrugged. I've been trying to keep a lid on this, but word is spreading fast. Through the window, Marcus could see Veltara approaching the nearest beehive with careful steps. Her small head tilted in concentration. Her mother's voice called out in Dragnari, probably warning her to be gentle. Sarah, they're refugees. The council exiled them for having female quadruplets. They would have died if I hadn't helped. I know. I've read your reports, yes. You've been filing reports. Whether you realize it or not, every supply order, every medical request you've made has been flagged by the monitoring systems. Sarah leaned forward. Marcus, the situation is more complicated than you know. The Dragnari Council isn't just angry about the exile violation. They're terrified. Terrified of what? Of being wrong. Sarah's expression grew grave. 3 other Dragnari settlements have reported multiple female births in the last 6 months, always in groups of 3 or more. The council is starting to suspect that your doctor, Zarath, wasn't cursed. She was the first sign of a species-wide evolutionary shift. Marcus felt the pieces clicking together in his mind. Population dynamics. If environmental or genetic pressures were driving the species toward higher female birth rates. Exactly. The council's rigid adherence to tradition may have led them to exile the very individuals who represent their species' adaptation to changing conditions. Sarah paused. There's more. We've detected Dragnari ships in nearby systems. They're not invasion fleets, they're exile transports. The council is banishing every family that produces multiple female offspring. How many? 17 ships so far. All heading toward the dead zones with minimal supplies and failing life support systems. Marcus closed his eyes. 17 ships meant dozens of families, hundreds of individuals, adults and children sent to die in the cold vacuum of space because tradition demanded that change be punished rather than understood. What are you asking me to do, Sarah? Officially? Nothing. The Colonial Council wants this situation to resolve itself quietly. Unofficially? Sarah's smile was sharp. I seem to remember a certain xenobiologist who once argued that humanity's greatest strength was our ability to choose compassion over convenience. That xenobiologist got his research defunded and his career destroyed. That xenobiologist just proved his point better than any research paper ever could. Sarah gestured toward something off-screen. I'm transmitting coordinates to your personal database, 17 sets of them. If someone were to broadcast on emergency frequencies, and if someone happened to mention that sanctuary was available on a certain mountain world. Sarah, you're talking about harboring dozens of alien refugees. The legal ramifications alone would be severe if anyone found out about it. Good thing space is big and monitoring stations are expensive to maintain. Sarah's expression grew serious. Marcus, in 6 hours, the Colonial Council is meeting to discuss the Dragnari situation. The recommendation on the table is complete communication blackout with their space. No aid, no interference, no contact. They're going to let them all die, unless someone provides an alternative solution. Someone who has, let's say, practical experience with Dragnari human cohabitation. Marcus looked out at his peaceful meadow, where 4 baby dragons were learning to fly under their mother's watchful eye. In 3 months, they had transformed his quiet homestead into something resembling a nature preserve for impossible things. If I do this, if I help the others, what kind of support can I count on? The kind that comes with plausible deniability and creative supply manifests. I have a network of people who believe that doing the right thing is more important than following the wrong orders. Sarah leaned back in her chair. Marcus, you've already proven that humans and Dragnari can coexist peacefully. Your documentation has been comprehensive. That made Marcus laugh despite the situation. You've been monitoring us that closely? I've been protecting you that closely. There are factions in colonial security that would love an excuse to eliminate your little experiment. The fact that it's been working perfectly has been their biggest frustration. Working perfectly might be an overstatement. Really? Because my reports show a 90% improvement in local ecosystem health. revolutionary advances in interspecies behavioral study, and the first successful case of Dragnari infant medicine outside their home worlds. Sarah's smile was proud. Also, satellite imagery suggests that your bee colonies are producing honey at 3 times the normal rate. Something about optimal atmospheric conditions. Marcus glanced toward the hives, where Veltara was now sitting completely still while dozens of bees explored her scales. The dragon's breath contains trace amounts of methane and other gases that the bees find beneficial. It's been an unexpected symbiotic relationship. See? Revolutionary advances. Sarah's expression grew serious again. Marcus, I need a decision. Those 17 ships don't have much time, and the Colonial Council meeting starts in 6 hours. What about Zarath? This isn't just my choice to make. Then you'd better go talk to her. I'll maintain this channel for 1 more hour. Then I have to return to official protocols. The hologram flickered out, leaving Marcus alone with the weight of decision. Through the window, he watched Zarath demonstrate proper wing positioning to her daughters. She moved with natural grace despite her size, and her voice carried clearly across the meadow as she encouraged each small dragon through the challenging maneuvers. Marcus walked outside and called her name. She approached with her usual careful dignity, but he could see concern in her golden eyes. There is trouble, she said. It wasn't a question. There's opportunity, Marcus corrected. But it comes with significant risk. He explained Sarah's call, the exile ships, and the choice they faced. Zarath listened without interruption, her expression growing more thoughtful with each detail. 17 ships, she repeated when he finished. How many individuals? Sarah estimates between 300 and 400, mostly families with multiple female offspring. Zarath looked toward her daughters, who had noticed their conversation and were approaching with curious expressions. In our language, there is a word Kethmiran. It means the obligation of the fortunate to those who suffer for the same cause. And what does that mean for us? It means we must help them. Zarath's voice was firm. But human friend, you do not understand what you would be taking on. My people, when frightened, can be difficult, proud. Some may not accept help from humans. Some might. That has to be enough to start with. The space required, the food, the medical care for so many. Zarath shook her head. Your mountain is large, but not that large. Marcus grinned. I've been thinking about that. Do you remember when you asked me about the beehives? I told you that bees don't care about politics or fear of change? Yes. Bees also understand something that most intelligent species struggle with when the colony grows too large for one location. The solution isn't to fight for space or exile members. The solution is to establish new colonies in compatible locations. Zarath's eyes widened with understanding. You speak of expansion. This mountain range extends for thousands of square kilometers. Most of it is uninhabited government land that's been sitting empty for decades because it's too remote for profitable development. Marcus gestured toward the distant peaks. But it's not too remote for people who want to be left alone to build something new. A network of settlements, each one supporting what the others need. Exactly. Some families might prefer complete isolation. Others might want to be closer to neighbors. And some might even be interested in the kind of human Dragnari cooperation we've been developing here. Zarath was quiet for several minutes, watching her daughters practice their flight patterns. Veltara had been joined by her sisters, and all 4 were now surrounded by gently circling bees. If we do this, she said finally, if we offer sanctuary to the exiles, we become something new, not just refugees but founders of a new way of living. Are you willing to become something new? I became something new the day I chose to trust a lonely human beekeeper with my daughters' lives. Zarath smiled, her scales shimmering in the afternoon sunlight. The question is whether you are prepared for your quiet mountain to become the center of the galaxy's most unusual colonial experiment. Marcus looked at his peaceful meadow, his orderly hives, his simple homestead. In a few hours, all of that could change forever. Instead of one dragon family, he might be hosting hundreds of refugees. Instead of conducting quiet research on interspecies cooperation, he might be pioneering an entirely new model of colonial development. Veltara, he called to the smallest dragon. She looked up from her bee observations, her purple-scaled head tilting curiously. What do you think? Should we invite your relatives to visit our mountain? Veltara chirped something in Dragnari that made her mother laugh, a sound like wind chimes in a thunderstorm. She says, Zarath translated, That if they are as lonely as we were, they need friends like the bees. Friends who are small but make sweet things and work together to build something beautiful. Marcus nodded. Out of the mouths of babes, she also says that if they come, she will teach them about the bees, and maybe they will stop being afraid of small things that make big differences. Smart girl. Marcus looked at Zareth. Are we really going to do this? We are going to offer hope to the hopeless and homes to the homeless. Zareth's golden eyes sparkled with something that might have been excitement. And perhaps we will prove that evolution and tradition can coexist when both are guided by wisdom rather than fear. Then I'd better call Sarah back before her hour is up. Marcus, Zareth said as he turned to go. In our culture, there are ceremonies for moments when life changes forever. When young dragons take their first flight. When new settlements are founded. When two species choose to trust each other with their future. What kind of ceremonies? The kind that involve fire and honey and promises made under open sky. Zareth's smile was warm. I think, before we call out to the exiles, we should mark this moment properly. A ceremony for becoming something new. A ceremony for choosing hope over fear, growth over stagnation, and friendship over isolation. Zareth gestured toward her daughters, who were now performing elaborate aerial maneuvers while their bee audience watched from nearby flowers. A ceremony for the moment when a lonely beekeeper and a dragon mother decided that the galaxy needed more kindness and fewer rules about who deserved help. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, the same feeling he'd had months ago when he first heard Zareth's desperate distress call. But this time, instead of uncertainty, he felt certainty. Instead of fear, he felt anticipation. All right, he said. Let's have a ceremony. Then let's change the galaxy. The sun was beginning to set behind the mountain peaks, and the meadow was filled with the sound of working bees, playing dragons, and two very different beings planning to offer hope to refugees scattered across the stars. 2 years later, the mountain range that had once held only Marcus's small homestead now hosted the galaxy's most unusual experiment in interspecies cooperation. The Dragon's Rest Preserve, as it had come to be known, sprawled across 15 different valleys, each one carefully designed to meet the specific needs of its residents. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Central Coordination Building, watching the morning activities unfold across the valley below. Smoke rose from a dozen different cooking fires where human and Draknari families prepared breakfast together. In the distance, young dragons practiced their flying, while human children rode specially designed harnesses, both species shrieking with delight as they soared above the tree line. The transformation had not been without challenges. Of the 17 exile ships they had rescued, only 14 had accepted sanctuary at Dragon's Rest. 3 had chosen to continue their journey into deep space, unwilling to trust human motivations or accept what they saw as charity. Marcus understood their choice, even if it saddened him. The families that stayed had brought their own complex web of traditions, fears, and expectations. Some had been horrified to discover that their daughters would be living alongside humans. Others had been suspicious of Marcus's motives, convinced that no species offered help without expecting something in return. But children, Marcus had learned, cared little for adult prejudices. Veltara had appointed herself the unofficial ambassador to the human children who began arriving as word of the preserve spread. Dr. Sarah Voss had quietly arranged for families of scientists, engineers, and others willing to participate in the experiment to relocate to Dragon's Rest. These new human residents brought skills the growing community needed, and their children brought something even more valuable, the fearless curiosity of youth. Marcus watched as Veltara, now the size of a large dog with scales that had deepened to a rich purple gold, led a group of human and Draknari children on their morning exploration of the bee colonies. She had become the preserve's expert on human bee-dragon symbiosis, and her observations were being studied by xenobiologists across human space. The morning report, Administrator Chen. Marcus turned to find Kethval, one of the original exile leaders, approaching with a data pad. The older Draknari male had initially been among the most skeptical of human involvement, but over time he had become one of Marcus's most trusted advisors. Still calling me administrator when you outrank me in age and experience by about 50 years, Marcus said with a smile. Respect is earned through actions, not accumulated through years, Kethval replied formally, though his eyes held warmth. And your actions continue to earn respect. Marcus accepted the data pad and scanned the overnight reports. Food production was up 12% from last month, thanks to new hydroponic systems designed jointly by human engineers and Draknari biotechnicians. The medical center had successfully treated 6 cases of scale rot using modified human antibiotics. 3 new construction projects were ahead of schedule. And the morning's special report? Kethval asked. Marcus scrolled to the final entry and felt his heart skip. Twins. Jareth had twins, both female, Kethval confirmed, his rumbling voice filled with wonder. Born just after dawn. Mother and daughters are healthy, and the father has not stopped singing celebration songs. Marcus laughed. Twin dragons were rare under normal circumstances, but twin females were almost legendary. The fact that they had been born here, in the preserve, felt like a cosmic affirmation of what they were building. That makes 17, he said, thinking of all the dragon children born at Dragon's Rest in the past 2 years. 17 female births, 13 male births. Kethval confirmed. The shift in birth ratios continues to support your theory about evolutionary adaptation. Marcus had spent countless hours documenting and analyzing the birth patterns among both the original exiles and the new arrivals. The data strongly suggested that the Dragnari species was indeed undergoing a genetic shift toward higher female birth rates, likely an adaptation to population pressures or environmental changes in their home worlds. Any word from the Dragnari Council? Kethval's expression darkened. The same. They continue to denounce us as outcasts and forbid any contact with home worlds. But, he paused, looking uncertain. But, rumors. Reports from traders who travel the border regions. They speak of unrest on the council worlds. Young Dragnari questioning the exile policies. Some even openly advocating for contact with the preserve. Marcus nodded. They had been expecting this for months. The success of Dragon's Rest was becoming impossible to hide, especially as their scientific discoveries began filtering through academic networks. Human universities were clamoring for exchange programs. Dragnari scientists from neutral worlds had begun requesting permission to visit and study their integration models. Administrator, Kethval said carefully, there is something else. A priority message arrived during the night. From Commander Voss. Marcus looked up from the datapad. Sarah's last communication had been 3 weeks ago, confirming that the Colonial Council had officially recognized Dragon's Rest as a legitimate scientific preserve. Since then, they had been operating with unprecedented autonomy. What kind of priority message? The kind that requires your personal attention in the communication center. Immediately, Marcus made his way through the central building, passing laboratories where human and Dragnari researchers worked side by side, classrooms where children learned multiple languages, and workshops where 2 species shared tools and techniques. The communication center buzzed with activity as technicians monitored everything from weather patterns to shipping schedules. Sarah's hologram materialized as soon as Marcus activated the secure channel. She looked tired but excited. Marcus, we've got a situation developing that could change everything, she said without preamble. Good change or bad change? That depends entirely on how the next 12 hours unfold. Sarah gestured off-screen. We've received formal communications from 3 separate Dragnari factions. All of them want to establish diplomatic contact with Dragon's Rest. Marcus felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. 3 factions? The Council loyalists want to demand the return of all exile families and the immediate cessation of the preserve. The moderate reformers want to negotiate some kind of supervised reintegration program. Sarah paused. And the revolutionaries want to declare Dragon's Rest as the legitimate government of a new Dragnari nation-state. A nation-state? Sarah, we're a scientific preserve with about 1,000 residents. We're not trying to overthrow anybody's government. Try telling that to a species that's been fracturing along generational lines for the past 2 years. The success of Dragon's Rest has become a symbol. Marcus. For some, it represents hope and adaptation. For others, it represents dangerous change and foreign contamination. Marcus rubbed his temples. What are we talking about in terms of immediate threat? Council loyalists are mobilizing a fleet. Nothing massive, but enough to level your preserve if they decide to make an example of you. Sarah's expression grew grave. They're demanding immediate surrender of all exile families and your extradition for trial on charges of species corruption. And the other factions? The moderates are offering protection in exchange for agreeing to supervised integration programs. The revolutionaries are offering to declare Dragon's Rest a sovereign territory under their protection, if you'll agree to serve as the capital of their new government. Marcus stared at the hologram. trying to process the magnitude of what Sarah was describing. How long do we have? The Council fleet will reach your system in 18 hours. The moderate and revolutionary fleets are moving to intercept. But, Sarah shrugged. Space battles are unpredictable. You need to be prepared for any outcome. Sarah, there are children here. Families who just wanted a safe place to raise their kids. I know. That's why I'm calling. The Colonial Council has authorized me to evacuate any human citizens who wish to leave. We have 3 ships standing by. Marcus looked through the communication center's windows at the bustling preserve beyond. Human and Draknari children played together in the courtyard. Scientists shared discoveries over lunch. Families from 2 different species had built something unprecedented together. What about the Draknari families? That's more complicated. Officially, they're refugees under temporary protection. We can't force them to leave, but we also can't guarantee their safety if they stay. And unofficially? Sarah's smile was sharp. Unofficially, a certain beekeeper once convinced me that humanity's greatest strength is choosing compassion over convenience. If someone were to declare that Dragon's Rest was under human protection as a scientific preserve and humanitarian sanctuary, the Council fleet would have to deal with Colonial Defense Force vessels. It would certainly complicate their plans. Sarah leaned forward. Marcus, this is your decision. But I need to know within the next 6 hours what kind of support you want from us. The communication ended, leaving Marcus alone with the weight of choice. Through the windows, he could see Zarath approaching the building with her 4 daughters. All of them now magnificent adolescent dragons with scales that caught the morning sunlight like scattered jewels. Marcus made his way outside and found the dragon family waiting for him in the courtyard. Veltara, now nearly as tall as his shoulder, approached with her characteristic directness. There is trouble, she said in perfectly accented standard. We can smell it in the air. Fear scent, her sister Kirith added. Coming from the communication center, Zarath studied Marcus's face with golden eyes that missed nothing. The Council has found us. The Council, the Reformers, and the Revolutionaries. Marcus confirmed. They're all coming, and they all want different things. What do you want? Veltara asked. The question was so simple, so direct, that it cut through all the political complexity Sarah had described. Marcus looked at the dragon child who had become his first friend among the exiles, then at her mother who had trusted him with her daughters' lives, then at the preserve they had built together. I want what we've always wanted, he said. I want families to be safe. I want children to grow up without fear. I want 2 species to prove that cooperation is stronger than conflict. Then we stay, Zarath said firmly. All of us. Together. Even if it means fighting, especially if it means fighting. Zarath's voice carried the authority of a mother protecting her young. We are no longer exiles, Marcus Chen. We are founders, and founders do not abandon what they have built. Over the next several hours, word spread throughout the preserve with the efficiency of a wildfire. By afternoon, the entire community had gathered in the central amphitheater, an open-air structure that could accommodate both species comfortably. Marcus stood before nearly 1,000 residents, looking out at faces both human and Draknari. Children sat beside their parents, scientists next to farmers, original exiles alongside recent arrivals. We have 18 hours to decide who we are and what we're willing to defend, he began. In that time, 3 different fleets will arrive in our system, each one representing a different vision of our future. He explained the situation clearly, without minimizing the dangers or overstating the possibilities. When he finished, the amphitheater was quiet except for the distant sound of bees humming among the flowers. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, one of the human scientists, stood first. I came here to study interspecies cooperation. What I found was proof that the future doesn't have to repeat the mistakes of the past. Count me as staying. One by one, others rose to speak. Kethval declared that the preserve had become more home to him than the worlds of his birth. Young Draknari, who had been born here, said they knew no other life than cooperation. Human families who had found purpose in building something new pledged to defend it. When the speaking was done, only 12 individuals, 6 humans and 6 Draknari, chose to leave with the evacuation ships. The rest, nearly 1,000 strong, chose to stay and face whatever came. That night, as the 3 approaching fleets maneuvered for position in the outer system, the residents of Dragon's Rest held the largest ceremony in their short history. Fires burned throughout the preserve. Honey mead flowed freely. and voices in 2 languages sang songs of home and hope and determination. Marcus found himself standing with Zareth and her daughters on the hill, overlooking the central valley. Below them, the preserve sparkled with lights and activity, alive with the energy of a community that had chosen to stand together. "Do you ever regret it?" Zareth asked. Answering my distress call, Marcus considered the question seriously. "I was a lonely beekeeper who thought his life's work was over. Now I'm the administrator of the galaxy's most successful interspecies colony, about to negotiate with 3 different governments while surrounded by friends who trust me with their children's futures." He smiled. "It's been quite an upgrade, even if tomorrow brings war, especially if tomorrow brings war. Because war means what we've built here matters enough for people to fight over it." Marcus gestured toward the lights below. 2 years ago you asked me why I helped you. I said it was because you asked and because no mother should watch her children die. That's still true, but it's not complete anymore. What would make it complete? Because this, Marcus indicated the preserve, the ceremony, the 1,000 voices raised in song. This proves that evolution and tradition can work together when both are guided by love instead of fear. And because your daughters and their children deserve to inherit a galaxy where being different is celebrated instead of punished, Veltara, who had been listening to the adult conversation with the patient attention of a very intelligent young dragon, spoke up. "The bees taught me something about fighting." "What's that, little star?" Zareth asked, using her pet name for her youngest daughter. "Bees will die to defend their hive, but only if the hive is worth defending. They know the difference between a temporary threat and a permanent danger." Veltara looked up at Marcus with eyes that held wisdom beyond her years. "Tomorrow, we find out if we've built something worth defending." Marcus reached out and gently touched the young dragon's scaled head. "We have, Veltara. We absolutely have." The ceremony continued late into the night, but eventually the preserve settled into watchful quiet. On the hill, a human beekeeper and a dragon family kept vigil, watching the stars where 3 fleets moved toward a confrontation that would determine the fate of everything they had built. In the distance, the beehives hummed their eternal song, and the mountain wind carried the scent of flowers, honey, and hope into the vast darkness of space.